The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened, as if holding on to the memory of the storm. Silas stood in the mouth of a narrow alley, his trench coat collar turned up against the damp air. In the near distance, the warehouse loomed, its concrete walls mottled with dark stains, the faint orange glow of sodium lights leaking through the high, grimy windows. The IT was the kind of building that wasn't supposed to have history, yet you could feel the weight of stories trapped in its steel bones. Shipments moved at night, money counted in the shadows, lives traded like currency. Silas adjusted the strap of the bag slung over his shoulder, his fingers brushing the hidden holster beneath his coat. His other hand remained loose at his side, the way it always did when his instincts told him that the next hour could tip the scales one way or another. Inside that warehouse was the man they called Roth. No last name, no history you could pull from records. A ghost wrapped in flesh, and the one thread Silas believed could unravel the whole web. The first obstacle wasn't the locked chain link gate. It was the two men leaning against a black SUV just inside. Their casual posture was a lie. The glint of metal beneath their jackets betrayed their readiness. Silas moved without drawing attention, slipping into a side passage that led toward the loading bay. The smell of wet concrete mixed with something sharper, oil, maybe, or diesel. His footsteps were swallowed by the ambient hum of distant generators. He kept his breathing measured. Every movement counted. Every shadow could conceal a pair of eyes. Inside the warehouse, the soundscape changed. The rhythmic hiss of machinery. The muffled thump of crates being set down. Low voices, almost drowned by the noise, but not quite. Men speaking in clipped sentences, codes embedded in their words. Silas crouched behind a stack of pallets. Through the narrow gap between slats, he caught sight of a man unloading boxes stamped with foreign markings. The labels weren't in any language the average dock worker would recognize. He'd been here before. Not this building, not this city, but this exact atmosphere. The air thick with unspoken rules, the eyes that tracked strangers without moving their heads. The faint undercurrent of paranoia that said one mistake, and you're done. That Silas's plan hinged on one thing: talking to Roth without alerting the rest of the crew. That meant weaving himself into the flow of the operation. Invisible until it was too late for anyone to react, a figure emerged from an office at the far end, a tall man in a tailored coat, moving with the unhurried certainty of someone who knew no one here would dare stop him. Roth. Even from this distance, Silas could see the precision in Roth's movements. Not just confidence, but calculation. He didn't scan the room because he didn't have to. He already knew where everyone was. Silas waited, letting Roth move deeper into the floor, speaking briefly with the foreman. Then Roth turned toward the back corridor. Perfect. Silas rose from his crouch, keeping his steps soft, closing the distance without drawing the gaze of the others. The hum of machinery covered most of his approach. When Roth stepped into the corridor, Silas was only a few paces behind. The corridor was narrow, the lighting dim. The walls were bare concrete, the air colder. Roth, Silas called softly, his voice pitched just above the hum of the warehouse. Roth stopped, turned. His eyes were sharp, gray, and not the least bit surprised. "You've been walking behind me for 30 seconds, Roth said calmly. "Either you're very confident or very foolish." "I'm looking for answers," Silas replied, "and you're the only one who can give them." Roth's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Everyone's looking for answers. Most don't like the ones they get." Their voices were low, almost conversational, but every word carried weight. Silas could feel the tension in the air tightening, a wire ready to snap. "You move shipments for the Black Meridian," Silas said, "but you also move something else, something off the books. Tell me what it is, and maybe we both walk out of here." "Maybe." Roth tilted his head. "You don't sound sure." Silas met his gaze. "Because I'm not." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Roth took a step forward, close enough that Silas could see the faint scar running from his temple into his hairline. "You're here for more than cargo manifests," Roth said. "Who sent you?" Silas didn't answer. His silence was the answer. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor, heavy, fast. Roth glanced over Silas's shoulder, and the look in his eyes shifted just slightly. "Too late?" Roth murmured. Point. Three men appeared, blocking the way out, their hands already moving toward weapons. Silas's mind went into overdrive. Angles, distances, the weight of the gun under his coat. The knowledge that once the first shot was fired, the whole warehouse would come alive like a nest kicked open. Roth stepped back, giving Silas a clear line, as if testing him. Silas moved first, the next seconds. Blurred into motion, ducking low, drawing the gun, the crack of the first shot echoing like thunder in the narrow space. One man dropped, the others scattered for cover. Roth was already moving, disappearing through a side door. Silas followed, the sound of boots and shouts chasing them both. The door opened into a maze of catwalks high above the main floor. Below, men were scrambling, grabbing rifles from open crates. The machinery's hum was now joined by the sharp bark of orders. Roth didn't look back, but his voice carried over the noise. "You wanted answers, Kane? Let's see if you survive long enough to get them." And then he was gone, swallowed by the steel shadows. Silas kept moving, each step taking him deeper into the enemy's nest, where one wrong turn meant a bullet, or worse. Somewhere ahead, Roth's footsteps echoed, leading him toward the truth or into a trap. The air inside the warehouse was stale, heavy with the lingering tang of oil, rust, and something else. Faint but metallic. Blood? Maybe. Silas paused in the shadow of a towering stack of cargo. Crates listening. The hum of the city beyond the corrugated walls was muted here, as though the world had been put on pause just for this moment. Footsteps, soft, measured, deliberate, moved somewhere ahead. They didn't belong to workers. The gait was too slow, too cautious. Whoever it was had training, or at least enough sense to move like they were expecting trouble. Silas shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet, each movement calculated to keep his silhouette hidden from the thin shafts of moonlight that knifed through gaps in the metal siding. His eyes adjusted, tracing shapes in the dark. Rusted barrels, tangled ropes, the skeletal outline of an old forklift abandoned in the corner like a forgotten sentinel. Somewhere deeper inside, a murmur of voices. 2, no, 3. Their tones were low, but the rhythm gave them away. Men exchanging quick, clipped sentences like they were confirming details. Silas eased closer, one slow step at a time. The words began to take shape in his mind as he caught more of them. Shipment moves at dawn. Boss wants no mistakes. Kane, problem. The last word sent a cold thread of adrenaline through him. His name. They knew. He ducked behind another crate, pressing his back to the wood. The faint creak of the boards beneath his boots felt too loud in the silence, so he stilled and let the voices fill the space again. Take him out before he gets close. That was all he needed. Confirmation. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't just another piece of the puzzle. It was a strike aimed directly at him. From the corner of his eye, a thin flicker of movement, like a shadow shifting when it shouldn't. Silas dropped instantly into a crouch, and a split second later, a knife edge hissed through the air where his head had been. He twisted, caught the attacker's wrist mid-strike, and slammed it against the crate's corner. The blade clattered to the floor, but the man didn't hesitate. He drove forward, trying to pin Silas with sheer momentum. Silas turned the force against him, twisting sharply and sending him stumbling into the open. A sliver of moonlight revealed the man's face. Sharp cheekbones, cold eyes, and a jagged scar across the jawline. No hesitation, no fear. The man lunged again, this time pulling a second blade from his boot. Silas sidestepped, his shoulder brushing the rough wood, and his own knife flashed free in the same motion. Metal met metal with a harsh ring that echoed through the empty warehouse from deeper inside. The voices stopped. Silence. Then boots. Multiple pairs, coming fast. Silas knew he had seconds at most. He shoved the attacker back into the path of the incoming reinforcements, buying himself the smallest of windows, and darted toward a narrow service corridor he'd glimpsed earlier. The footsteps split, half chasing him, half tending to the man he'd dropped. The corridor was tight, lined with rusting pipes that leaked occasional bursts of steam. Every step was an echo chamber. The heat and damp clung to his skin, but the air smelled fresher toward the far end. A way out, maybe, If he could make it, a burst of gunfire shredded the silence, rounds sparking off the pipes and punching holes in the thin sheet metal wall. Silas ducked low, using the shadows as cover, counting the shots. 3, 4, click. Reload. That he pushed forward, knowing hesitation meant death. The corridor opened into a side room, a small maintenance area cluttered with tools, workbenches, and a half-collapsed wall that bled moonlight into the space. Beyond it was the pier. Open ground, dangerous, but freedom if he could clear it. He crossed the room in 3 strides and froze that a figure stood in the breach, framed in silver light. Not one of the foot soldiers. Taller, broader, and holding a weapon Silas hadn't seen in years. A short-barreled, custom-milled shotgun with a burnished steel finish. The man smiled. Not with warmth, but with the slow, deliberate satisfaction of a hunter cornering his prey. Silas Kane, he said, his voice like gravel. You've been sniffing too close to the fire. Silas's grip on his knife tightened. His mind ran through options. None good. The shotgun meant close quarters lethality, and the man's stance told him he knew how to use it. Step aside, Silas said evenly, and maybe you keep breathing. The man chuckled. You always did have a mouth on you. Shame it won't matter in about 30 seconds. From behind Silas, the echo of footsteps swelled again, fast closing in. He was being boxed in. His pulse didn't spike. He'd trained for worse, but his mind sharpened to a razor point. Every detail mattered now. The distance to the shotgun's muzzle, the looseness in the man's left knee, the slick sheen of oil on the floor where the moonlight hit just right. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Silas moved. Silas lunged. Not at the man, but to his left, boots sliding deliberately into the oil-slick patch. He let his weight drop low, skimming under the line of fire, just as the shotgun thundered. The blast ripped the air above his head, peppering the far wall with shrapnel and sending a wave of heat down his neck. Momentum carried him into the man's flank. His shoulder struck with bone-jarring force, enough to stagger but not topple. The shotgun was already coming down again, the barrel swinging towards Silas's ribs. He caught the fore end, twisting hard, the muscles in his forearm screaming as the weapon fought to stay aimed. The man grunted a harsh, guttural sound and drove his knee upward. Silas turned just in time to catch it on his hip instead of his gut, pain radiating down his leg. The shotgun fired again, this time harmlessly into the floor, the recoil kicking like a live animal. Splinters and sparks exploded upward, stinging Silas's cheek. He slammed the butt of his knife into the man's wrist. Once, twice. The third strike made the grip falter. The weapon clattered away, skittering across the oily floor. Silas didn't go for it. He knew the others were seconds away from rounding the corner. Instead, he drove forward, pinning the man against the jagged breach in the wall. Moonlight lit the man's eyes, flat, merciless, with a strange flicker of recognition. You think you're getting out? He hissed. I don't think, Silas said. I make sure. He shoved him hard enough that the weakened wall gave way with a metallic shriek, spilling both of them through onto the pier outside. The night air hit them in a rush, cool and sharp with the scent of salt and diesel. They hit the boards, rolling. The man recovered fast, too fast, and swept Silas's legs from under him. Silas landed hard, the breath punching out of his lungs, and saw movement in his peripheral vision. 3 shapes emerging from the warehouse breach, guns drawn. The man barked an order, alive. That narrowed Silas's options even more. They weren't going to kill him here. They wanted him contained, which meant they'd underestimated him as he rolled sideways into the shadow beneath the pier's loading crane, using the heavy steel legs for cover. Gunfire erupted, bullets chewing splinters from the wooden deck. Somewhere nearby, a boat engine coughed to life that Silas's mind mapped the pier in an instant. 5 meters to the ladder down, another 2 to the waterline, then a swim in black, frigid water toward the service quay. Risky, but not as risky as letting himself get boxed in. A burst of gunfire cracked the air above him. He moved on instinct, bolting for the ladder, boots pounding the deck. The night blurred into a rush of sound. Shouted orders, pounding feet, the hiss of water against the pier's pilings. He dropped onto the ladder, and slid the last 3 meters, hitting the water in a clean dive that masked his splash under the ambient lap of waves. The cold punched his chest like a fist. He kicked hard, forcing himself to stay under until the echoes of gunfire were swallowed by the water's muffled roar. When he surfaced, it was in the shadow of the service quay. His fingers found the slick edge of a maintenance platform, and he hauled himself up, lungs burning. Somewhere above, voices still searched for him, but they were moving toward the pier's far end. They thought he'd gone for the open water, but he allowed himself a single breath of relief before he heard it. Another set of footsteps, light, deliberate, and far too close. He turned, dripping and cold, to find a woman standing in the narrow service alley, the faint glow of the quay's security light catching the edge of her face. Her coat was too fine for the setting, her boots spotless, and her expression wasn't surprise. It was expectation. "Silas Kane," she said softly, almost like a greeting between old friends. "I've been waiting." He turned, dripping and cold, to find a woman standing in the narrow service alley, the faint glow of the quay's security light catching the edge of her face. Her coat was too fine for the setting, her boots spotless, and her expression wasn't surprise. It was expectation. "Silas Kane," she said softly, almost like a greeting between old friends. "I've been waiting." Silas's shoulders tensed instinctively. Water dripped from his hair, running down the collar of his jacket, but the cold didn't matter. What mattered was the way she stood, hands folded lightly before her, head tilted just slightly, as if she already knew how this conversation would end. "You've got the wrong man," Silas replied, voice flat. He didn't step closer, but he didn't retreat either. The alley was too narrow to make a quick escape without brushing past her. Her eyes glinted under the weak light. "No, I've got the right one, and you know it." Silas took a slow breath, letting the tension settle into his muscles instead of releasing it. She had the kind of calm that only came from confidence. Either she was carrying something dangerous, or she had backup nearby. Probably both. He glanced down the alley over her shoulder. Beyond her was the mouth of the street, but the shadows there were too deep to make out movement. That was deliberate. "What do you want?" he asked, to talk. She smiled faintly. "Somewhere warmer, perhaps." "I'm fine here." Her gaze swept over him, his wet clothes, the faint scrape along his cheek, the way his left hand hovered near the inside of his jacket. She didn't flinch. "If I'd wanted you dead, Silas, it would have happened already. You know that." "Maybe, but people who want to talk usually start with their names." The smile returned, but it was thinner this time. "Alara." No last name, no title, just a single word, as if that alone should be enough. And maybe it was. Silas's memory stirred uncomfortably. The name wasn't unfamiliar. 3 years ago, in the border city of Veros, he'd heard it whispered alongside the sort of rumors you didn't want confirmed. Black market broker, information dealer, someone who could sell you the location of your enemy's safe house before they even finished unpacking. "You were in Veros," he said slowly. "I was everywhere, Kane. You just didn't notice." He didn't like that answer. He liked even less the way she leaned casually against the brick wall, her breath not even clouding in the chill air, as though the cold couldn't touch her. "What do you want?" he repeated. "This isn't a negotiation. You're going to come with me. And if I don't..." Her eyes flicked once to the street, then back to him. "Then the men behind you will make sure you do." Silas didn't turn. He didn't have to. The faint scrape of a shoe on wet pavement behind him was enough. 2 men, maybe 3, judging by the spacing of the steps. He could take 1, maybe 2, but not with her in front of him and the alley walls closing in. "You've got 10 seconds, Alara said softly. "Walk, or we drag you." He didn't move right away. His mind raced, not in panic, but in calculation. Every route he knew in this part of the quay. Every possible alley, door, or fire escape. The problem was, all of them required him to get past her first. "Fine," he said finally, voice low. Her smile widened just enough to confirm she'd expected this all along. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the mouth of the alley. "After you." The street beyond was empty, lit only by a pair of flickering sodium lamps. A black sedan idled at the curb, its windows tinted dark enough to swallow the interior. One of the rear doors opened before Silas even reached it. He slid inside, the warmth of the car's heater washing over him in an instant, making the damp of his clothes feel heavier. Alara followed, settling into the seat across from him. Between them was a narrow console, and behind the wheel, a driver whose face was completely obscured by the shadow of the headrest. The sedan pulled away smoothly. No one spoke for the first few blocks. Silas watched the quay recede through the tinted glass, its lights dissolving into the black water. "You look older," Alara said finally. "You look like trouble," he replied. "Always." She crossed one leg over the other. "You've been moving in dangerous circles, Kane. The kind of circles that don't overlap by accident. Is that why you hauled me off the street? To talk about my social life?" She ignored the jab. "There's a man named Darius Rourke. You know him." Silas's jaw tightened. "I've heard the name. Don't be coy. You've done more than hear it. You crossed him. And now, whether you meant to or not, you've crossed me." The car slid into a narrower road, the hum of its engine growing quieter as the buildings rose taller around them. Silas leaned back, letting her talk. People who like to play power games usually revealed more than they realized if you stayed silent long enough. "Rourke's been reckless lately," Alara continued. "Deals made without consultation. Cargo moved through ports I control. And then there's you, stealing from him." "I didn't steal from him." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not what he says." "Then maybe you should talk to him." "I am. Through you." Silas let out a quiet breath. "So this is about leverage." "This is about survival," she corrected. "Yours." "Mine." "Everyone's." The car slowed, pulling into an underground garage. The sound of the city dulled to a muffled hum as they descended. When the sedan came to a stop, the driver stepped out without a word, opening Alara's door first. She didn't get out right away, just watch Silas. "This is the part where you decide," she said. "Work with me, and you live. Refuse, and—" She shrugged delicately. Silas stepped out of the car. The garage was empty except for a single service elevator at the far end. Alara walked ahead without looking back, trusting him to follow. They took the elevator up to a high floor. He couldn't tell which, as the panel had no numbers, just a single button. When the doors opened, they stepped into a wide, dimly lit room lined with glass on one side. The city sprawling out below like a circuit board, and in the center of the room was a single table. On it sat an envelope. "Open it," Alara said. Silas didn't move. "Why?" "Because it's the reason you're here." He crossed the floor, the sound of his wet boots faint against the polished concrete. The envelope was unsealed, heavy with whatever was inside. He slid the contents out. Photographs, grainy and black and white, taken from a distance. All of them were of him, in some. He was moving through crowded streets. In others, he was speaking with people he recognized, contacts, informants, people who didn't want to be photographed. One image made his pulse slow. Him on the quay earlier that night, taken from above. "You've been following me," he said. "Not just me," Alara replied. "Rourke. Others. You've been sloppy, Kane." He turned to face her. "So what is this?" "Blackmail." "This is an opportunity," she said. "Rourke thinks you're a threat. I think you're an asset. The difference is whether you're smart enough to choose the right side. And the right side is yours." Her smile was almost genuine this time. "Of course." Silas let the photographs fall back onto the table. "And if I walk out of here, you won't make it to the elevator." The silence stretched. He could feel the weight of the city outside, the pulse of 1,000 lives moving beneath them, none of them aware of the decision being made in this room. Finally, he said, "Tell me what you want." And Alara did. She slid a small device across the table toward him, sleek, black, almost unremarkable, but the weight of it suggested otherwise. Silas's eyes narrowed as he studied it, noting the faint hum that seemed to resonate through the metal. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. "What is this?" he asked cautiously. "Information," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "A map of Rourke's operations, his safe houses, his shipment routes, and most importantly," she paused, letting the emphasis land, "the people who have been manipulating you, Kane. People who've been hiding in your own shadows." Silas felt the familiar chill creep up his spine. The underworld was always dangerous, but Alara's calm certainty hinted at a threat that went beyond normal criminal scheming. He'd faced killers, mercenaries, and sociopaths, but there was something different here. Something precise, surgical, and inescapable. "And you're giving this to me? Why?" he asked, suspicion sharpening his tone. "Because I need you," she replied simply. "Rourke is moving faster than expected. He doesn't anticipate someone like you acting, and right now, that's a weapon I can't afford to ignore. You have skills, intuition, you see patterns others can't. If you're with me, we can end this before it spreads beyond control." Silas weighed her words. Every instinct told him that accepting her offer meant stepping into another layer of danger. But refusing could very well be fatal. He had been walking alone for so long, relying only on himself. But now he realized that even he might not be enough. "Fine," he said at last, his voice measured. "I'll work with you. For now." Alara's eyes softened slightly, just a flicker. "Good. That's all I need for now." She gestured toward a side door that led out of the room, toward a private stairwell. "We move fast from here. Rourke doesn't wait, and neither can we." Silas followed. The hum of the city above replaced by the muted echoes of their steps in the concrete stairwell. Every movement was deliberate, every sound calculated. The tension in his shoulders eased only fractionally. He didn't fully trust her, and he didn't intend to tee the bottom. They emerged into an underground corridor lined with steel doors. Alara stopped at one and swiped a card through a reader. A green light flashed, and the door hissed open. Inside, a small, dimly lit room held an array of screens, maps, and electronic devices. Silas recognized immediately. It was a surveillance hub, complete with feeds from every port, street corner, and warehouse that mattered to Rourke's operations. "Everything we need," she said. "And now it's yours too." He moved to the table, studying the screens. Every detail, every location, every movement of Rourke's men in the past 24 hours, logged and accessible. The complexity was staggering. "Why trust me?" Silas asked again. Circling the screens, Alara's gaze was unwavering. "I don't, but I trust that you understand leverage, Kane. And right now, I hold all the cards. You hold the skills. Together, we have a chance." The first steps of a plan began to form in Silas's mind. Surveillance points, chokeholds, extraction routes. Every angle, every risk calculated with ruthless precision. But the closer he studied, the more he realized the depth of deception involved. There were anomalies, data points that didn't match, timestamps that didn't align, patterns designed to mislead. Someone had been watching him almost as closely as Alara had. "This isn't clean," he muttered, more to himself than her. Alara glanced over her shoulder, expression neutral. "Nothing involving Rourke is ever clean. But that's why you're important. You can see through the smoke and mirrors. And now we move." She led him through another corridor to a storage area where a black SUV waited. Silas climbed in, feeling the warmth against his soaked clothes. The engine started silently, gliding out of the underground garage. Rain lashed the windshield. Lights from the quay blurred into streaks of orange and white. The SUV moved with deliberate speed, each turn precise, avoiding main streets, keeping to side roads. Silas watched, noting patrols, cameras, every detail as though filing it in his mind for future use. "First stop," Alara said, "is one of Rourke's safe houses. There's something you need to see for yourself." Silas remained silent. He had learned long ago that questions asked too soon could be dangerous. He let her speak, let the city and the rain wash over the vehicle as it carried them forward. The safe house was on the outskirts, a nondescript building with boarded windows and a fenced perimeter. As they approached, Silas noted the absence of patrols, a silence that was louder than any noise. He could sense the setup, the trap potential. Alara killed the engine 100 meters from the house. "We proceed on foot from here," she said, pointing toward a service entrance. "I need you close, Kane." Eyes open, reflexes sharp. "If this goes sideways, there won't be a second chance." Silas adjusted the holster under his jacket, checking the Glock. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hood, and the cold seeped into his bones. But his senses were sharp, his mind calculating every move. They crossed the empty lot, the gravel crunching underfoot, until they reached the service door. Alara swiped another card, and the lock clicked. They slipped inside, into darkness. The interior was dim, the faint hum of a ventilation system the only sound. Silas moved forward, hand hovering near his weapon. His eyes scanned every shadow, every corner. Then a whisper of movement from the far end of the hall. "Stay back," Alara murmured, voice low. Silas nodded. Together, they advanced, each step measured. The shadows seemed alive, stretching and twisting. Silas felt the familiar rush, the adrenaline sharpening his senses, every nerve taut. And then, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man he didn't recognize, yet whose presence made every instinct in Silas' scream alert. The man's eyes held a cold calculation, a predator assessing prey. "You're Kane," the figure said, voice smooth. "And you've been busy." Silas's hand went to his weapon, but Alara placed a firm hand on his arm. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let him speak." The man smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "I've been expecting someone like you. Smart, resourceful, dangerous, but not careful enough. And now, you've walked right into my domain." Silas's mind raced. Every option, every escape route, every contingency. This wasn't just about survival. It was about outthinking someone who clearly knew more than he did. Alara tightened her grip. "We have to move," she said. "But listen, watch him. Everything counts." The man stepped aside, revealing the inner room. Inside were screens, stacks of files, and a single laptop glowing faintly. Silas realized immediately. The information here could expose the entire network, but only if he could survive long enough to access it. And as he stepped inside, every instinct screamed that the night was far from over. This was only the beginning. The man's eyes didn't waver, and neither did Silas's. He took in the room, noting every stack of paper, every flickering monitor, every cable snaking across the floor. A misstep here would mean death, or worse, capture. Alara stayed close, her presence a silent reminder that he wasn't alone, but also that every action had consequences. "See that laptop?" the man said, voice calm but edged with menace. "Everything you've been chasing, every shipment, every contact, every betrayal is on there. But it's booby-trapped. One wrong move, and it all goes up. Fire, data lost, perhaps worse. You can't just take it. You have to earn it." Silas's fingers itched for the trigger, but he forced himself to breathe. Observation first. Calculation second. The laptop wasn't just a tool, it was a test. A puzzle laid out by someone who understood him well enough to anticipate panic, reaction, instinct. And he hated being anticipated. Alara shifted slightly, keeping her eyes on the man. "We're not here to play games. Give us the information and we walk away," she said firmly. The man's smile widened. "Ah, but Kane, you never do things the easy way. That's why I like you. But liking you doesn't keep you alive. You see, there's a sequence. Every step matters. One wrong action, and you'll trigger every alarm, every hidden lock, every silent measure I've planted." And then, he shrugged, almost casual. "Then it becomes a very expensive lesson in obedience." Silas's mind raced. He analyzed the layout. Stacks of files forming choke points, the laptop sitting atop a pressure-sensitive platform, security cameras hidden behind vents. He estimated the range, angles, and timing. Every second mattered. He could do this. But one misstep and it would all explode in his face that he moved closer to the laptop, crouching low, every muscle ready to react. Alara mirrored him, silent and tense, watching the man's every twitch, every minute gesture. The man's eyes followed Silas like a hawk, calculating, anticipating, enjoying the tension. And Silas, cold and wet, focused, had to ignore the fear and focus on the solution. Point one slip of the finger, one misjudged step, one incorrect breath, and the trap would trigger. But Silas Kane had survived worse. He paused for a heartbeat, memorizing the positions, the timing, the light reflections on the floor that could reveal sensors. His hand hovered over the laptop. He moved one step, then another. The man smirked, didn't falter, but his eyes flicked briefly to a panel on the wall. And then Silas acted at a sudden twist, a snap movement, sliding to the left, fingers grazing a hidden switch under the desk. A barely perceptible click echoed. The man's expression changed, a fraction of recognition that Kane had found the loophole, but too late. Silas snatched the laptop, tipping it toward him, careful to avoid pressure triggers. Alara acted simultaneously, sweeping the man's arm aside as he lunged for a concealed weapon. Kane's reflexes, honed over countless nights of danger, carried him through the movement. The laptop was in his grip. The man cursed under his breath, realizing that his trap had been circumvented. But the relief was brief. Alarms blared suddenly, shrill and piercing. Red lights flooded the room. Silas's heart pounded, not from the fear, but from the awareness that the battle was only beginning. "Get to cover," he shouted, diving behind a stack of files as bullets slammed into the steel shelving around him. Alara fired precise and controlled, taking down one assailant who had appeared from the shadows. Kane's fingers typed frantically on the laptop, decrypting data, capturing vital intel as the chaos of gunfire, shouts, and alarms filled the room. The man was not finished. He dove behind another desk, pulling a secondary device from his coat. Silas recognized it instantly. An electronic disruptor capable of frying the laptop in seconds. Time stretched. Every heartbeat echoed. Kane lunged, rolling forward, knocking the device aside as Alara subdued another attacker. Sparks flew. The walls vibrated from heavy impacts as the building's security measures kicked in. Kane's mind processed the incoming data while his body executed flawless movements, weaving through danger. Minutes passed like seconds. Every second counted. He had the intel. He had the laptop. But the room was now a war zone. Bullets ricocheted, glass shattered, alarms screamed, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of reinforcements moving through the corridors approached. He glanced at Alara. "We need an exit now." She nodded. "Follow me. I know a way out." They bolted toward a service hatch she had noted earlier, climbing through narrow ducts and ventilation shafts. Every inch was a calculated risk. One wrong move could drop them into a firing line below. Kane's muscles screamed, lungs burned, but his focus was absolute. The laptop was secure. The intel could not be lost. Finally, they emerged into a hidden corridor, the hum of the city above a distant throng. Kane caught his breath, heart still racing. "We're not clear," he said. "Reinforcements will be here any second." Alara's expression was unreadable. "We have a head start. That's all we need. For now." They moved quickly, silent, calculating, blending into shadows as they made their way to the next checkpoint. The stakes were higher than ever. Kane realized that tonight had shifted everything. Allies, enemies, truth, deception, all intertwined. And as they reached the outer service door, he knew one thing with certainty. Rourke would stop at nothing to recover what they had stolen. And the information they carried would make them targets of every predator in the city. Yet Kane's resolve hardened. He had survived darkness before, navigated lies, deception, and death. Tonight would be no different. He was ready. Outside, the rain had lessened, but the city's shadows were deeper than ever. Every streetlight could conceal an enemy. Every echo could be a trap. Kane and Alara paused, listening. Movement in the distance confirmed what he already suspected. They were being hunted. Kane gripped the laptop tightly, mind racing through contingencies. Escape routes, choke points, backup plans, all cataloged in seconds. He knew the city like the lines on his hand. Yet tonight, every familiar corner had become a potential death trap. Alara glanced at him. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Always." And then, the unmistakable roar of engines echoed through the alleyways. Black SUVs emerged from the shadows, headlights cutting through mist. Kane recognized them immediately, Rourke's enforcers. There was no negotiation left, only survival, strategy, and the instinct to fight through the oncoming storm. Silas Kane braced himself. Tonight, the hunt was mutual. The mist hung low over the city's industrial district, clinging to Silas Kane's coat and hair, soaking his gloves and boots, but he hardly noticed. Every sense was engaged, scanning the shadows, the narrow alleyways, the corrugated steel roofs that stretched into the foggy distance. Somewhere in the background, the city's heartbeat continued. A distant siren, the hum of tires over wet asphalt, the occasional echo of a shout. But for Kane, it all became part of a larger symphony of danger, each note a potential threat or opportunity. Beside him, Ilera moved silently, her boots making no more than a whisper against the slick cobblestones. She was a ghost in the haze, her eyes sharp and calculating. Kane trusted her implicitly, not just because of her skill, but because she mirrored his rhythm, the methodical precision with which he approached every threat. Their unspoken synchronization had been honed over countless hours in similar circumstances. And now, with Rourke's network closing in, it was the difference between survival and death. They ducked behind a pile of rusting crates, pressed into the shadows as a pair of headlights swept past the alley's mouth. Kane felt the familiar tension coil tight in his shoulders, a cold prelude to the surge of adrenaline that would follow. His fingers brushed against the sidearm at his hip. He didn't need to touch it yet. These were reconnaissance steps, the preliminary maneuvers that determined whether they could strike or be struck. Ilera leaned close, her breath barely audible. 3 men ahead. Light patrol, moving left to right. No heavy weapons, but watch the corners. They'll have eyes on every blind spot. Kane nodded. He studied the 3 figures as they rounded a corner. Rifles slung casually across their shoulders, but their posture betrayed alertness. The faint shimmer of rain on their jackets reflected dim light from a distant street lamp, giving away their position. Kane's mind raced through angles, distances, trajectories, timing. Each fraction of a second mattered. He signaled with a subtle flick of his wrist. Ilera understood immediately. They split their movement, slipping along opposite walls, converging on the patrol with the silence of predators. Kane felt the thrill, the knife-edge focus that always preceded the storm of action. The first man paused, scanning the darkness. Kane held his breath, counting heartbeats, then fired a single suppressed shot. The round struck true. The man slumped silently against the wet brick wall. Ilera's movement was simultaneous, her own target neutralized with the same quiet precision. The third turned, startled, but Kane was already moving, sliding low, knocking the rifle aside with his forearm, elbow striking the side of the man's head. A second, suppressed shot finished the job. They moved quickly through the alley, eyes scanning every shadow, ears straining for the faintest hint of additional threats. Kane's mind was a calculated machine. Exit routes, fallback positions, potential reinforcements, the timing of their movements. The rain had dulled the sounds of the city, but it also amplified the faintest noises. Water dripping from a rooftop, the soft crunch of a discarded can, the distant echo of a closing garage door. Ahead, a narrow service tunnel led into the industrial yard where Kane had first encountered Rourke's operations. The tunnel was tight, forcing them to move single file. Kane went first, feeling the walls for weak points, listening for signs of motion. Ilera followed, her presence steadying, reinforcing the rhythm of movement. Each step was measured, deliberate. One misstep could mean discovery, a firefight, or worse, the tunnel opened into the yard. Rainwater pooled across the concrete, reflecting the flickering light of distant floodlights. Kane surveyed the area. 3 SUVs parked strategically, men milling near them, weapons ready. The yard was a trap, a controlled kill zone. Kane knew this. He could feel it. But he also saw opportunity. Here, he whispered, "We funnel them. Force them where we want them." Ilera's eyes glinted. Precision. Timing. One misstep, and we're exposed. Kane smiled faintly under his hood. That was exactly how he liked it. Controlled chaos. The deadly ballet where every step was lethal. They moved into position, placing debris, crates, and overturned pallets to channel the SUV's approach. Every object, every shadow, every puddle was leveraged as part of the battlefield. The first SUV entered the trap. Kane fired, aiming at the engine block. The vehicle lurched violently, tires spinning in the slick rain. Sparks flew as metal struck metal. The driver lost control, crashing into a stack of shipping containers. The second SUV tried to compensate, but Kane had anticipated the trajectory. Two shots struck critical points, and the vehicle fishtailed, striking drums and crates that toppled in a controlled cascade. Alara moved with lethal grace, neutralizing gunmen who appeared at the third vehicle. Kane's calculations allowed him to cover her blind spots, his own fire precise and deadly. The rhythm of action was intoxicating. Danger, anticipation, calculated chaos. Finally, only the last SUV remained. Kane elevated himself on a nearby crate, using height and cover to his advantage. He aimed, counting angles, the weight of each bullet calculated to disable the vehicle without endangering Alara. The shot rang out, suppressed but deadly. The SUV lurched, crashing into a metal drum, scattering debris across the yard. Kane dropped, rolling to avoid ricochet, while Alara took down the final gunman. The immediate threat was neutralized. Kane and Alara pressed forward, moving toward a safer route that led deeper into the industrial network. Each step, each breath was calculated. The city's fog concealed dangers, but also offered cover. Every alley, every doorway, every shadow was both a potential threat and an opportunity. Inside an abandoned warehouse, Kane and Alara paused. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling, puddles reflecting the dim glow of distant floodlights. The space was large, open, with stacks of crates and discarded machinery offering cover. Kane set the laptop down on a steel crate, reviewing data while Alara moved to check exits and windows. Hours passed as they planned. Each monitor, each feed, each map became part of a larger picture. Kane identified weak points in Rourke's network, inconsistencies in patrols, vulnerabilities in shipment routes. Every piece of information added to the strategy, every decision a thread in the web they were weaving. Outside, the city seemed calm, but the tension was tangible. Kane and Alara could feel the movement of Rourke's men, the subtle shifts in patrols, the signals of preparation. They were predators, and the hunted had yet to realize it. Finally, Kane pointed at one feed, showing movement at the main depot. They're repositioning. Reinforcements are coming. Alara's jaw tightened. Then we strike first. Timing is everything. Precision is everything. We hit before they consolidate. The two of them spent the next hour finalizing every detail. Exit routes, fallback positions, contingencies, timing sequences, all calculated, all rehearsed in their minds. Kane felt every nerve taut, every muscle coiled. The night outside was alive with potential threats. Every shadow a possible enemy. AT last, they prepared to move. Kane gripped the laptop, secured his weapons, and signaled to Alara. They stepped out into the misty night, the city a living labyrinth of danger. Each movement was deliberate, each step measured, each breath calculated. The industrial district stretched ahead, silent but charged with potential. Every corner could conceal a sniper, every rooftop a trap. Kane's mind cataloged it all, running simulations at impossible speed. Alara moved in perfect sync, her presence a constant, reassuring rhythm. They had reached the point of no return. The next strike would define the night, possibly the outcome of the larger war against Rourke's empire. Kane felt the familiar thrill, the lethal clarity that came from being alive, fully present, fully aware. Every sense sharpened, every instinct ready. The city waited. Rain fell in soft sheets, mist rising from the asphalt. Every shadow held potential threats. Every echo of movement signaled opportunity or danger. Kane's pulse was steady, but his mind raced, analyzing, anticipating, preparing. And then, from the shadows ahead, movement. A figure, tall, deliberate, watching, waiting. Kane and Alara froze, assessing. This was no random patrol. This was calculated. Someone knew they were here. Someone was prepared. Kane adjusted his grip, signaling to Alara. We're not alone. The figure stepped forward, and the faint light revealed a familiar silhouette. Kane's breath caught. Recognition, dread, and anticipation collided. The confrontation was imminent. The night, the city, and the hunt all coalesced into this moment. Kane knew that the next few seconds would determine survival, strategy, and control, and as the mist swirled around them, every shadow seemed to shift, every heartbeat counted, every breath held. The city and the enemy waited. The alleyway smelled of wet asphalt, oil, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Silas Kane crouched low, the folds of his soaked coat sticking to his body, eyes scanning the shadows with a predator's patience. Rain misted in the dim light of distant street lamps, making the edges of buildings shimmer like heat waves. The city was alive, but it was a predator in its own right, silent, observant, and lethal. Every sound, every reflection could give away a presence, and Kane knew that the slightest mistake here could be fatal. Illyra moved beside him, her motion precise, almost ghostly, boots making no sound on the slick cobblestones. Kane could feel the tension in her shoulders, the subtle tightening of her grip on her sidearm. They were a synchronized unit, each movement anticipated and mirrored. Together, they were a force, but alone, they would be vulnerable. Ahead, the main depot sprawled like a fortress, containers stacked in a chaotic lattice, cranes looming over the scene like silent sentinels. The SUVs from the previous night were gone, replaced by heavier armored vehicles, their engines idling quietly, almost mocking the intruders. Kane's pulse accelerated slightly, but he forced his breathing slow, controlled, each inhalation measured against the rhythm of his thoughts. "This is it," he murmured, voice low. "The heart of Rourke's operation." Illyra's gaze swept over the depot. "Security looks tighter than last time. We'll have to improvise. Timing will be everything." Kane's mind raced through the possibilities. Every angle, every cover point, every potential entry and exit had to be accounted for. Reinforcements could arrive in minutes, and the moment they were spotted, the entire facility could erupt into chaos. But Kane thrived in chaos. Every threat was a calculation, every risk a variable he could manipulate. They crept forward, sticking to the shadows, using the mist and piles of crates as cover. Kane's eyes caught the subtle shift in light as a patrol moved along the catwalks above. He counted 3 armed men, rifles ready, scanning the area. Timing the gaps in their patrols, Kane signaled to Illyra, and they moved again, silent, deliberate, like ghosts gliding through the rain-soaked labyrinth. As they neared the core of the depot, the faint hum of machinery mixed with muffled voices reached their ears. Kane's pulse quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. This was where information met action. Somewhere in the heart of the facility lay data, shipments, and possibly the next clue to Rourke's network. Every second mattered. Illyra crouched beside him, whispering, 2 guards at the main entrance. One is distracted with a tablet. Kane assessed. We go quietly. Take them simultaneously. No shots unless necessary. In perfect unison, they moved. Kane's hand shot out first, catching the wrist of the distracted guard, twisting sharply. The man grunted, but was incapacitated before sound could escape. Simultaneously, Illyra neutralized the second guard with a swift, precise strike, sending him to the ground unconscious. They moved past the entrance, eyes and ears alert. The interior of the depot smelled of diesel and metal, cold and impersonal. Stacks of containers rose like towers, creating a maze that could hide both hunters and prey. Kane led the way, the laptop secure under his arm, every step calculated to avoid the surveillance cameras blinking faint red above. Then the unexpected, a faint sound behind them. Kane froze, listening. A single boot on concrete, slow and deliberate. Not a patrol, someone hunting them. He signaled Illyra with a subtle hand gesture. They ducked behind a stack of crates. A figure emerged, tall, lean, moving with deliberate grace. The shadows hid most details, but the movement, the presence, was unmistakable, trained, confident, lethal. Kane's mind raced. Whoever it was, they were not here by accident. The figure paused, scanning. Kane caught the glint of a weapon, not raised yet, but ready. He knew that if they were discovered now, escape would be difficult. He had to act, but carefully. 3 options, he whispered to Alara, who leaned close. Engage, retreat, or create a diversion. Alara's eyes narrowed. Distraction. Make it fast. Kane moved silently to a container edge, picking up a loose bolt and tossing it toward the far side of the warehouse. The metallic clatter echoed faintly. The figure's head snapped toward the sound, just enough for Kane to maneuver. They slid past, keeping low, the tension so thick it pressed against Kane's chest. The figure recovered quickly, moving with fluidity, but Kane and Alara were already advancing. The goal, the server room, where the next piece of intelligence awaited. Every corridor, every container became a battlefield. Kane's mind cataloged angles, egress points, and potential threats with machine-like precision. The storm outside mingled with the tension inside, rain tapping on the roof, muffled thunder rolling, creating a symphony of distraction and concealment. Then came the first firefight. A patrol rounded a corner unexpectedly. Kane reacted instantly. A suppressed round to the first man's chest, another to the second. Alara moved with him, taking down a third with a swift elbow and knee combination. The clash was quiet but lethal, bodies hitting the wet concrete with a muted thud. They pressed on, the server room now in sight. Kane's hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the buildup of adrenaline, the constant tension, the knowledge that one mistake could end everything. Inside the server room, machines hummed, casting a cold blue light over the room. Kane set the laptop down, connecting to the network, fingers moving with speed and precision. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, data being siphoned, analyzed, decrypted. Every second was critical, but the figure from before appeared in the doorway, weapon raised, eyes cold and unyielding. Kane and Alara froze, calculating. There would be no subtle approach now. This was a confrontation, inevitable and deadly. The figure spoke, voice low and cutting. "I've been expecting you, Kane." Recognition struck Kane like a physical blow. The shadow from the rooftop, the hunter in the mist, someone from his past, someone he thought long gone. Betrayal and anticipation collided in a flash of memory. Alara moved instinctively, positioning herself between Kane and the threat. Kane's mind worked rapidly, weighing options, predicting movement, calculating outcomes. The standoff stretched taut as a wire, each heartbeat amplified in the stillness of the server room. The first shot fired, a warning, precise, aimed to unbalance. Kane rolled to cover, returning fire, moving with lethal efficiency. Alara engaged as well, their movements synchronized, a deadly dance of survival and counterattack. Machines hummed, servers glowed, rain tapped the roof, and the room became a cage, echoing with gunfire, suppressed thuds, and the low groans of combatants. Kane's mind was singularly focused. Neutralize the threat, secure the data, survive. Minutes felt like hours. Every shadow could conceal an enemy, every reflection a danger. Kane moved, rolled, fired, and ducked, the laptop clutched tightly against his chest. Alara covered his flank, eliminating threats with precise, silent movements. Finally, the figure faltered a misstep. Kane seized the moment, closing the distance, taking the upper hand with a swift maneuver, pinning the enemy against the wall. The standoff ended as abruptly as it began, leaving only the hum of the servers and the distant echo of the storm outside. Kane exhaled slowly, scanning the room, ensuring no remaining threats. The data was secure, the immediate danger neutralized, but he knew the night was far from over. Rourke's network was vast, and this confrontation was only the beginning of a larger, more deadly battle. Alara moved to his side, her expression grim but resolute. "We have what we came for, but they'll regroup. This isn't over." Kane nodded, eyes still on the doorway. "It's never over. Not until we decide it is." They exited the server room cautiously, moving back into the mist and shadows, the storm continuing to wash the city. Every step forward was a calculated risk. Every movement could be their last if they weren't careful. The city was a maze of danger and opportunity, alive with potential threats and unseen eyes. Kane and Alara navigated it with precision. Every breath, every heartbeat a testament to experience, skill, and sheer will as they disappeared into the foggy streets. Kane felt the weight of the night pressing down. The hunt was far from complete, the enemy still moving, calculating, waiting. And in the distance, a faint light flickered, signaling that the next chapter in this deadly game was about to begin. Kane led the way down the narrow streets, the rain falling heavier now, drumming against rooftops and gutters with a constant, oppressive rhythm. Every puddle reflected fractured light from the sporadic street lamps, creating illusions of movement that Kane's trained eyes immediately discounted. Or did they? The mind had a way of playing tricks, especially when adrenaline coursed through veins like wildfire. Alara followed closely, her hand resting lightly on the grip of her sidearm, every muscle coiled. Kane could feel her tension radiating, and he knew that while she moved with absolute control, inside, her mind was assessing every exit, every window, every potential ambush. She was always 3 steps ahead of the danger. The same way, Kane had to be always scanning, always calculating. They reached a fork in the alley, and Kane paused, listening. Faint murmurs floated in from the direction they had just come. Voices too low to decipher, but they were not alone. Reinforcements. Always reinforcements. He pressed his back against the wall, feeling the cold moisture seep through his coat, numbing his shoulders, but he didn't flinch. We split. Kane whispered. Alara shook her head, eyes narrowing. No, we stay together. 2 targets instead of 1 is easier to manage if we encounter them. Kane nodded, trusting her instinct. They moved as one, shadows among shadows, inching forward. A single misstep could be fatal. Every sense alert, every nerve screaming in anticipation. The street opened onto a small courtyard, illuminated by a single flickering floodlight. Kane scanned quickly. 2 guards patrolling the perimeter, their rifles slung lazily, but their attention scanning every corner. Perfect timing could allow them to pass unnoticed. But Kane had never been one to rely solely on luck. He crouched behind a trash bin, eyeing the guards. On my mark, he said. We created a version. Short, sharp, and silent. Alara gave a slight nod. Kane picked up a loose brick, feeling its weight, its potential. He tossed it toward the far side of the courtyard. The brick clattered against metal trash cans, echoing just enough to catch attention. One guard's head snapped in that direction. The other followed instinctively. They moved. Kane dropped low, sliding behind the nearest stack of pallets. Alara followed seamlessly, neutralizing the first guard with a swift chokehold that sent him unconscious to the wet concrete. Kane engaged the second with a sharp, precise strike to the neck, ensuring no sound escaped. Heart pounding, Kane took a deep breath. The courtyard was clear, but only for a moment. From the opposite corner, movement, another patrol. This one heavier, armed with automatic rifles. Kane's mind raced, plotting angles, trajectories, escape routes. Every calculation precise, every decision potentially life or death. Alara leaned close. We flanked them through the warehouse. It's narrow, limits their firing angles. Kane nodded. The warehouse was a maze of crates, containers, and machinery, perfect for a controlled engagement. They slipped inside, boots silent against the damp concrete. The smell of oil and metal was thick, mingling with the faint scent of rain seeping in through broken windows. The first patrol emerged, rifles raised. Kane fired first, a single suppressed round to the chest of the nearest man, followed by a second to the second target. Alara moved like a shadow, neutralizing another with a knife to the throat, silent, lethal, efficient. The echo of bodies hitting the floor was drowned out by the hum of machinery and the storm outside. Kane pressed on toward a series of reinforced doors leading deeper into the warehouse. The laptop he carried contained critical information, shipment schedules, weapon routes. names that would expose Rourke's entire network. Every step toward that data brought them closer to unraveling the operation, but also closer to danger. He glanced at Alara. Almost there. Keep sharp. The doors loomed, heavy steel reinforced with locks and keypads. Kane pulled a small device from his belt pouch, attaching it to the panel. Numbers scrolled rapidly, lights flickered. The lock clicked. Green light. Success. Inside, the room was cold, sterile. Rows of servers hummed softly, casting a pale blue glow. Kane placed the laptop on a crate, connecting cables, scanning data. His fingers moved with speed and precision, every second crucial. Outside the reinforced walls, he could hear faint movement, footsteps, faint radio chatter. The enemy was regrouping, closing in, and time was limited. Then a sound, sharp, deliberate, metal scraping against concrete. Kane's eyes narrowed. Someone had entered the warehouse. Not a patrol. Too precise, too deliberate. Alara was immediately at his sidearm raised, eyes scanning that a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, deliberate, exuding confidence and lethal intent. Kane's pulse quickened. Recognition struck. Someone from his past, someone who knew him intimately, someone who had once been buried in memory and thought lost. The standoff was immediate. Every muscle tensed, every instinct alive. The figure spoke, voice cold and measured. Silas Kane. The hunter becomes the hunted. Kane's mind raced. Every escape route, every angle, every weapon. He calculated, anticipating the figure's moves. Alara moved instinctively, blocking flank, ready to neutralize threats. Shots rang out, suppressed, echoing through the warehouse. Kane and Alara returned fire, moving with lethal efficiency. Each maneuver pre-planned, yet executed in real-time instinct. The figure was fast, precise, anticipating their tactics. Each movement was a dangerous puzzle. Each breath could be the last. Kane ducked behind a server bank, exchanging fire, moving closer. Alara took out another opponent who had entered silently. The room became a controlled chaos, shadows twisting with gunfire, echoes, and the rain's relentless percussion outside. Minutes stretched, elongated by adrenaline. Kane seized a brief opening, lunging forward, disarming the figure, engaging in hand-to-hand combat. Every strike measured, every motion deliberate, each moment potentially decisive. Finally, the figure faltered, a moment of hesitation. Kane exploited it, subduing them, securing the immediate area. Servers continued to hum, data streaming across the laptop. Victory, temporary but essential, was achieved. Kane exhaled, scanning the warehouse, confirming no remaining threats. Alara moved beside him, expression grim but controlled. We got what we came for, but Rourke's not done. They'll regroup, and next time, they'll anticipate us. Kane nodded, fingers brushing the damp strands of hair plastered to his forehead. Then we make sure they don't get the chance. Exiting the warehouse, rain still pouring, they melted into the misty streets, shadows among shadows. Every alley, every streetlight, every reflection was a potential hazard, but Kane's mind cataloged and processed, the constant calculation sharpening his instincts to eye in the distance. Faint lights flickered, signals, possibly reinforcements. Kane and Alara ducked into cover, waiting for the right moment to move. The storm raged around them, masking their movements, creating a veil of protection. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. The night was far from over. Rourke's network remained intact, dangerous, and unpredictable. Kane and Alara had won this skirmish, but the war was ongoing, and the cost of error would be fatal. They advanced deeper into the city, each shadow a potential threat, each movement a calculated risk. Kane's pulse was steady, mind sharp, senses attuned. Every detail mattered. The glint of a weapon, the shift in sound, the weight of a shadow. As they rounded a corner, Kane paused. Ahead, a faint silhouette moved with precision, deliberate and calculating. Recognition flashed in his mind. Someone new, someone lethal, someone who would change the rules of the night. The confrontation was imminent. The next few minutes would define survival, strategy, and control. And as the rain poured, the storm's rhythm echoing through the alleyways, Kane knew the city was alive, and the hunt had only just reached its deadliest stage. Kane's gaze locked on the silhouette, analyzing every movement. The figure didn't rush, didn't hide entirely. Every step was deliberate, a challenge in itself. Kane could feel the weight of anticipation pressing on his shoulders, muscles coiling, senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. This was no ordinary patrol. This was calculated, intelligent, and deadly. Alara crouched beside him, scanning as well. Her hand rested lightly on the grip of her sidearm, finger poised. Kane gave her a subtle nod, signaling readiness. They moved as one, shadows within shadows, each step measured, silent, deliberate. The figure suddenly shifted, revealing a glint of steel, a blade catching the dim light of a distant lamp. Kane's pulse surged. The storm outside masked the sound of the blade being drawn, but he felt it in his bones. The presence, the intent, the lethal potential. "Stay calm," Kane whispered under his breath, muscles tensed. Predictable, controlled, calculated. Alara's eyes narrowed. "Do we engage now?" Kane shook his head slightly. "Not yet. Watch, learn, then strike." They advanced, hugging the walls, keeping low, using every shadow as cover. The figure mirrored them, stalking them, almost testing their reactions. The tension was almost tangible, a pressure in the air that made every heartbeat seem amplified. Suddenly, the figure lunged, blade flashing in a deadly arc. Kane barely rolled aside, feeling the wind of the strike against his cheek. Alara moved simultaneously, engaging the attacker from the opposite side. Sparks of motion, precise, lethal. Every strike was calculated, every dodge instinctive, honed from years of survival. That Kane's mind raced, cataloging angles, predicting trajectory, anticipating next moves. He countered with a swift sweep, knocking the blade aside, following with a strike to the side of the figure's torso. Alara was already behind him, delivering a calculated kick that staggered the attacker backward. The fight became a deadly dance. Shadows shifted, rain pattered on the surrounding metal surfaces, and the echoes of combat mingled with the distant storm. Every move, every breath, every thought was critical. Kane could feel adrenaline mixing with clarity. Danger heightened his senses, sharpened his mind, and made every second stretch into eternity. The figure recovered quickly, lunging again, faster, more precise. Kane blocked with his forearm, the impact sending a jolt up his arm. Alara rolled to the side, striking the figure's knee, destabilizing the attacker. Kane moved in, closing distance, delivering a rapid series of controlled strikes. The fight reached a brutal crescendo, blades clashing, bodies twisting, the storm outside echoing the chaos inside. Kane felt a rush of awareness, every sound, every movement cataloged, every danger assessed. He struck with precision, exploiting openings, anticipating counters, staying ahead in the deadly exchange. Finally, the figure faltered, misstepping. Kane seized the opportunity, delivering a final, calculated strike that sent the attacker sprawling. Alara moved in, securing the blade, ensuring no further threat. Breathing hard, Kane scanned the alley. The rain washed over them, masking their movements, cooling their heated bodies. The storm seemed almost symbolic, a cleansing of the violence, but Kane knew the night was far from over. He retrieved the laptop, ensuring data integrity, every file intact. "We've got what we came for," Kane murmured, voice low, but his mind was already racing ahead. Escape routes, potential pursuit, contingencies. Alara's eyes met his. "They'll follow." Rourke never loses sight of a problem. Kane nodded, scanning the darkened streets, every shadow, every movement, every sound cataloged. "Then we make sure we're not here when they arrive." They moved quickly, using the storm as cover, shadows as allies. Every corner was approached with caution, every intersection a potential hazard. The city was alive, predatory, and Kane was acutely aware of it. Every step forward was a calculation. Every breath a test of patience and skill. As they reached a quieter street, Kane paused, sensing movement behind them. Not immediate, not threatening yet, but present. Someone was tracking them, silent, precise. He gestured for Alara to take cover, and they pressed against the walls, blending with darkness. The figure behind them paused, observing, calculating, but did not advance. Kane's mind raced, predicting motives, anticipating next moves. He knew they were being hunted, and the hunter was patient, meticulous, deadly. Ready? Kane whispered to Alara. She nodded. Always. They moved again, silent, careful, threading through alleyways, avoiding lights, avoiding sound. Every step measured, every heartbeat monitored, every decision weighted. Kane knew that one misstep could be fatal, but he also knew that hesitation was just as deadly. The chase led them to an old warehouse district, abandoned buildings looming like silent giants. Kane's mind cataloged every potential vantage point, every route of attack, every possible escape. They entered the largest warehouse, the door creaking as it shut behind them. Inside, the air was musty, thick with dust and debris, but it offered cover. Kane and Alara moved deeper, scanning, listening, aware that the hunter could be anywhere. The storm outside masked noise, but not completely. Faint footsteps echoed, a shadow flickered, and Kane's instincts flared. Then, from the darkness, the figure struck again. Faster this time, catching them off guard. Kane barely reacted in time, rolling aside, but the force of the strike sent him stumbling. Alara intercepted, blades clashing, strikes precise. The fight resumed, a deadly ballet in darkness and rain. Kane used every technique, every skill, every instinct, countering, anticipating, reacting. Alara was equally formidable, their combined movements seamless, lethal. Minutes stretched into a blur. Every strike, every dodge, every breath was calculated precise. Kane felt the familiar rush of focus, adrenaline sharpening perception. He could see the trajectory of the attackers' movements before they completed them, anticipate counters, exploit weaknesses. Finally, Kane delivered a decisive blow, sending the figure crashing into a stack of crates. Alara moved in, disarming and restraining the attacker. Silence descended, broken only by the storm and their ragged breaths. Kane retrieved the laptop, ensuring all data was intact. He glanced at Alara. We've survived, but this is only one step. Alara nodded, her eyes sharp, aware. Rourke will escalate. Next time, they'll come with everything they've got. Kane's mind raced ahead, planning, calculating, preparing. They moved out of the warehouse, rain still pouring, shadows hiding their movements. Every street, every alley, every corner was a potential threat, and Kane cataloged each one meticulously. The night was far from over. The city was alive with danger, every step forward a calculated risk. Kane and Alara navigated it with skill, awareness, and lethal precision. The hunter had survived another encounter, but the war was ongoing, and as they disappeared into the mist, Kane felt the weight of anticipation pressing down. The storm was relentless, the city unforgiving, and the next confrontation was inevitable. Somewhere ahead, Rourke's forces were preparing, calculating, hunting. Kane knew the night was only halfway through, and the hunt had only just begun. The rain hammered relentlessly against the rooftops, a ceaseless percussion that mingled with the distant wail of sirens. Kane's boots splashed through puddles, the cold seeping through his leather, chilling him to the bone. Each breath fogged in the night air, sharp and controlled. Alara stayed close, silent, her eyes scanning every shadow, every alley, every rooftop line with lethal precision. The streets seemed alive, crawling with unseen eyes, whispering threats in every corner. The Kane's mind ran calculations on instinct alone, each step measured against probability. Every trash can, every streetlight, every flicker of movement had potential danger. Yet he moved forward without hesitation, because hesitation was death. Ahead, The faint hum of a generator suggested activity, life, but of the wrong kind. He signaled Alara to slow. They pressed themselves into the wall of a crumbling building, blending seamlessly into darkness. From the corner of his eye, Kane spotted movement. Two figures, pacing, weapons slung but ready, their footsteps uneven, alert. Timing would be everything. He gestured to Alara, the left flank. A quick nod, and they moved as shadows, silent and deadly. The closer they got, the more Kane felt the tension coiling in his chest. A predator and prey simultaneously. They reached a narrow passage, littered with debris and rotting wood. Kane's hand slid along the wall, steadying himself, but every nerve screamed. A single sound, the snap of a bottle, a shifted foot, could set off a cascade of violence. Alara mirrored his steps, eyes flicking, hands ready. Kane's pulse was controlled, but his mind was a storm of calculations. The figures ahead split. One moved closer to a door, the other toward a stack of crates. Kane exhaled silently. He had the first one, a suppressed shot, clean and precise. The figures slumped silently, hitting the wet concrete without a sound. Alara took the second, moving like liquid, silent, lethal, neutralizing the threat before it could react. They paused, scanning the passage. More footsteps echoed. Reinforcements, heavier, armored. Kane's mind raced. The streets offered no escape. He needed a plan and a route now. The hum of generators and distant